So basically what I've compiled are different resources that people can use for healing, grounding, or stimulating. So we're always looking at how can we work with the affect regulation or the nervous system. So the stuff that we're going through is not meant to be charged. It's all meant to be resource-based. It's not necessarily even trauma-specific. It's human-specific, right? We all have a nervous system. We all have a brain. So it's understanding that, you know, when we're working with affect regulation, there are very practical things that we can do to shift the state that people are in. That's what we'll be looking at a little bit today. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about mindfulness because that is a core kind of building block when we look at working with affect regulation. And I love this diagram because it shows us mindfulness or mindfulness. And there is a difference between kind of having our brain really full, really busy, or being able to selectively attune our attention. The process of mindfulness is not about not having thoughts and emptying our brain. There's no such thing. Our brain is always thinking, but it is very much about being able to notice when my attention wanders and bringing it back. So it's called a serve and return process, where I notice my attention has wandered and I bring it back. I notice it's wandered and I bring it back. And maybe even I notice my attention keeps wandering to the TV in the next room while, you know, I'm trying to read my book. And maybe that's when my observing self says, you know what, I really want to read this, or I need to read this, but it seems like my attention keeps going to the TV in the next room. So that may mean that we shift, right? And give ourselves permission to transition out of that activity, because clearly it's not holding our focus and it's not, you know, being as effective as it could be. So when we look at what mindfulness is, it really is that awareness of present moment experience. Now, a moment is 1 to 2 seconds. So that is so tiny, right? It's so fleeting. And this is so critical because we work with so many people who are in tremendous pain, and they're so aware of the pain, they're so aware of the intrusions, they're not aware of relief, right? And a big part of the work that we do at our clinic is helping people to become aware of those shifts, right? Because that's what kills people, right? That's the lethality, when people feel like I'm going to be this way forever and ever and ever, and I can never experience in something else. That's when we see things like death by suicide, right? So we want people to understand that there are things that we can do to shift our affective state. And mindfulness is paying attention to our current experiences with present moment awareness. So in that 1 to 2 seconds, in a caring, compassionate, curious way. So it's not judging it, it's not analyzing it, it's not even fixing it, it's just noticing it, right? And we'll do a little bit of an exercise shortly that's a practice in that, just, you know, noticing what comes and goes. And when distractions come up, whether they're based in the past, the present, or the future, it's, again, just noticing that it's happening, right? Observing it, and then redirecting your attention. So it's there, people will say sometimes, oh, I'm not doing this right because my attention keeps wandering. And that is exactly the practice of mindfulness, right? Is the fact that you're even noticing that your attention is wandering, that's a mindfulness response, okay? We all have that. Our brain is a busy little brain. It takes in all of the sensory input from all around us, right? So it's processing a lot. And when we have experienced trauma and we're on high alert, all of that stuff comes in such a big way, right? So we're very attuned to senses around us. So Dan Siegel talks about mindfulness, and he says this is our awareness of our present moment experience with intention and purpose. So we're intentionally looking at this, intentionally reflecting on it, but we're not judging, right? We're just noticing. Just noticing. And Kelly McGonigal says it's a 3-part process. We have our intention. So we have the intention to be aware, to be mindful, to notice, right? Imagine that we taught clients all of these skills, and this is one of the things that, you know, I train therapists all around the world, and thousands every year, and this is one of the things that people say to me. They say, well, how do you get your clients to use their strategies? And I said, well, first of all, we're reducing the arousal so they can use the strategies, right? But second of all, I don't just tell them strategies. If I just tell them strategies, I'm working with that cognitive part of their brain. They're not embodying and experiencing it, so they're not going to use it and know the benefit. Instead, when we practice something, we notice. How does that feel? What shifts happen? Again, we're not delving into it, but it's as simple as, you know, Sue, are you able to notice what you're feeling in your body right now, right? say, what do you feel in your body?
Very relaxed.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, and so they may say, I'm feeling very relaxed. Now that is so critical. Again, if I have somebody who's chronically aware of the pain, the isolation, the loneliness, the overwhelm, I need them to be consciously and embodied and aware of that shift, right? Because that's potentially life-saving for people. So it's the intention to be mindful, and then it's also the attention, right? So I'm paying attention, but I'm choosing to notice, but the attitude is key. Because if I'm noticing and I'm going, oh, here's this response again, and I'm frustrated with it, that sends a different message to my body, right? Our body is trying to teach us something, our emotions are trying to teach us something. When we listen, it is remarkable. It is remarkable how things shift, right? They soften, they move. It's when we don't listen to our body that eventually it starts screaming at us, right? And I know, Sue, you asked me to talk to you before Matei's work. There's a beautiful book called When the Body Says No, and that's really, he's a medical doctor, and what he really learned is working with people who had all of these chronic issues like fibromyalgia or irritable bowel or Crohn's disease or all of these different things. When he traced back their history, what there was unresolved trauma, right? And that takes space in our body. So we have activation, takes up energy, it takes up space, and it's got to go somewhere, right? So when we can kind of be mindful and notice what's there, our body has so much to teach us, and it doesn't have to be, I guess, a nuisance, right? It can be I notice some tension in my shoulder, I'm just going to send a breath to that area, or as Sue said, I'm going to expand, right? Go into that opposite action. If I feel like my throat is constricted and I can't breathe, I'm going to try to open it up and maybe send a breath to the back of my throat. And there's a really great breath for that called Breathing Like the Desert. And I love it because, again, I think of how wonderfully and powerfully we are made. And the whole idea behind it is breathing into the back of your throat and creating your own little windstorm, right? But what you do is if you feel that sensation of breath in a very different way, and there's almost like this sense of kind of power that comes from within, which is really cool. So our intention to do so, the attention to what's coming up, and the attitude of our attention are incredibly powerful. And as it says here on this little quote, no one but ourselves can free our mind, right? No one can do this for us but ourselves. I remember once, and this was a younger veteran actually that I worked with. Unfortunately, he was off with PTSD. He had served in Afghanistan. And he said to me, he had done some thought tracking work, and he came back in and he said, listen, I don't know what you did, but I have all of these negative thoughts in my mind that you put in my mind. And I said, well, first of all, I don't have that much power, right? And if I did, I assure you, I would fill your mind with all kinds of positive thoughts. But what happened is when he became conscious of his thoughts and started noticing them, he noticed what that auto-programming, like 90% of our time, 90% of our time, we're in our subconscious mind. And what our thoughts are focusing on is the first 7 years of our life, those messages that are downloaded and programmed, and they're not even ours. They're not even our messages. They're the messages of who? Who gives us messages in the first 7 years of our life?
Parents, grandparents.
Yeah, family members,
Caregivers.
friends, yes, siblings, right? And that's the stuff that's often running in the background. So when we have a mindful awareness of what's coming up, that's when we can grab that stuff and go, hold on a minute, is this true, right? Is this serving me? Whose message is this, right? Is it mine? Do I need to hold this? Do I still want to? And it really restores quite a bit of power to us to shift. One of the things that I think is so important to know, and this is where science is showing us so much, is, with trauma, I teach a lot about the brain neuro, and I know Sue said Lori will get to that, and I really won't with this training. I don't get into like the training that we give professionals because this, like I said, Dave, I was explaining when you weren't in here, that the little segments I have are all skills building. So it's nothing about, trauma. It's teaching a little bit about the brain, body, and nervous system, and it's teaching tools and skills that we can use to promote affect regulation. So I won't be getting into that too much, but I usually do teach a lot about the neurological aspects of the brain in a really kind of user-friendly way. And what I'll share in relation to this is that generally we want to grow gray matter in the brain. Gray matter is a good thing. White matter is a good thing. It helps with information processing. It promotes integration between the brain, body, nervous system. It's a really good thing. It's what helps when we touch a hot stove, that information to get to our brain really quickly, move my hand off the stove, right? Gray matter is like the learning, the memory, the muscle of the brain. So typically, as we do something, we build those skills, right? With trauma, what we see is, and not just trauma, depression, anxiety, stress, we see increased gray matter in the amygdala. So that security guard actually grows in gray matter, and the hippocampus, which is our emotional learning and our ability to, usually the hippocampus would kind of talk to the amygdala and reframe, right? And it can't when the amygdala is on high alert. So, a colleague of mine uses the analogy of a porcupine and a hippo. And she says usually, like if you think of the hippocampus as a hippo, it's basically our brain's personal Google. If you think of a search engine, this is why when you guys are maybe trying to think of the name of a song and you can't think of it, because it's not emotionally charged, right? The more emotionally salient or charged something is, the more readily it'll come to you. Otherwise, you stop thinking about it, but then what happens usually a couple days later, the name of that song pops into your brain, and you're like, oh, I was long ago thinking about that. Just because we stop thinking about it doesn't mean our Google stops searching for it. It's just the less kind of relevant it is to survival, the less readily available that information is, right? So the hippo and the amygdala usually work side by side, and she said, think of the amygdala as like a porcupine, right? When the quills are down, that hippo can kind of come close and give feedback to help the amygdala learn, right? And to kind of reframe stuff, almost like you might to Toby when Toby gets scared, to say it's okay, right? Or you might see something in the distance that looks like a wolf, but as it comes closer, you realize it's a dog and it's wagging its tail and it's friendly. It gives the context to help us understand the situation. But when those quills of the porcupine come out, the hippo cannot get close enough to give context, right? So that security guard flips its lid, and there's just this big activation, and all of those other networks that help us make sense out of things are kicked offline, right? So when we see increased gray matter in the amygdala and decreased gray matter in the hippocampus, we actually want the reverse. And one of the really, really cool things about mindfulness and meditation training is the neuroscience research is showing us it's actually shrinking the gray matter in the amygdala and increasing the gray matter in the hippocampus, which is amazing. Because of that, and I think this makes really good sense when we look at the brain networks and what they're doing, because of that we see things like enhanced memory, attention, learning, right? We see improved emotional regulation because that security guard is settling down. We see greater self-management, greater fear extinction, and greater emotional balance, right? And as we reduce that arousal, we're then able to start to attune to self and others, right? When the amygdala is scanning for threat, there is no empathy. There is no empathy. There's no ability to look at you, or even me. I'm not even noticing what I'm feeling because I'm just looking for the threat. So this is quite cool. And when we see that reduced arousal come down, and I can start attuning to self and others, we see things like greater insight, empathy, morality, all of these wonderful kind of skills. So this is just one example of the brain before and after a 10-minute meditation. And it just shows you not only the settling of the brain's activity, but the localized attention. The areas that are being activated are the areas that are associated with that higher order, kind of self-reflective function, which is really, really wonderful and what we quite often want. So I'd like to take you through just a little guided practice. This comes from a book, Meditations for Daily Stress. I really like it. And again, yeah, it's a great book. It's really, really practical. And, I'm introducing you to lots of tools because we always want people to have lots of tools in their toolkit. Some things will work for some people, some things won't. Some things will work for people with a certain emotion and a certain situation, but won't work with something else. So I'm constantly introducing tools that they can add to their toolkit, and then we look at how could you use this, right? How might this benefit you in your daily life, at home, at work, wherever. So I'll just invite you to kind of be present as much as you're able to do so. You can sit with your eyes closed or open, you decide, dull gaze towards the table or floor, whatever feels best for you. And this is called meditating like the horizon. So what I'm going to invite you to visualize is just the horizon. I often think that this is not the best image, but it's one of my spots that I love as a resource. But you know when you look out on the water on a calm day and you see where the water meets the sky? That's the horizon, right? And generally there's that nice, smooth, calm line. So I'm just going to invite you to, we're going to visualize our brainwaves very clearly. And what I'm going to invite you to do is just kind of begin by sitting where you are, right? Just noticing what you're feeling in your body, whatever circumstance you find yourself in. And in a few moments, I'll invite you to close your eyes or dull gaze towards the table or floor. And I just invite you to imagine that your brain waves are moving in the process of like a flat green line. So generally we have blips that are going kind of up and down, and it's just imagining and allowing your brain to be still, to not be focused on thoughts or other distractions, but just calm. And maybe pairing the words, be still. Right? I find this so soothing. Be still. When we do this, we send a message to every cell in our body just to relax and to just be. Noticing now that this line is like the horizon on a calm ocean, pure, infinite, freedom, no sensation, no perception, just the horizon. And as thoughts come, and they will, because our brain is always moving, just try noticing them like waves rolling in and rolling back out and returning to that be still and visualizing the stilling of the waves. Treating them just as they are, little changes that will settle again. Come back continually to visualizing the horizon and focusing on just allowing yourself to be still. I'll invite you to come back to the room whenever you're ready to do so. And just notice how did that feel for you? If anyone's comfortable sharing, I'll invite you to do so.
Relaxing.
Yeah. I felt like I was at the sea. There you go.
I didn't want to
Yeah.
come back to the room. I didn't
No.
either. I'm like, Lorraine, I'm not done yet.
I know, and you can do it longer, but the beautiful thing about this is then you can take this tool and anytime, the really nice thing about our brain is now it's formed an association, this feels calm for me, so you can call up in your mind with your eyes wide open, the horizon, and say be still, and your brain knows what to do with it, and physiologically, your brain will respond. So I could be sitting in my workplace, I could be sitting on the bus, I could be in a crowded room where there's activation, and use that tool and tell my body and brain what to do in seconds, right? And the first time I learned this, I was actually at my daughter's soccer game and I was reading the book, and it was so amazing because I was out in nature, which I love to take in, but it was so busy all around me. And I was amazed that I was able, through focusing my attention like that, just to tune it all out. And that process again of just be still was like, oh, it went through my whole body. And it just was, and I have so many clients, this is one of the clients' drawings, that she says, this is a lifesaver for me. Because when everything is spinning, right, and chaotic, I just tell my brain, silence, right, just be still, breathe, focus, and it shifts instantly where she is, right. Maintaining authenticity and wellness, so this ties in beautifully with Lisa's message this morning, when we started with our intention, and I think, you know, so much that we do, and I love the question is this serving me, right? Or is what I'm about to do or say going to bring me closer to my intended outcome or further from it? A lot of times we react out of fear, and we do the very thing that increases the likelihood of what we're most afraid of having happen, right? And that comes from the amygdala. It gets kind of jacked up and worked up when we start looking at all the loss and threat and what might happen, and then we react, right? Instead of actually stepping back, being mindful and going, wait a minute, what's my intended outcome here, right? Is what I'm about to do moving me forward, or is it keeping me stuck? And that's a quick reframe that I'll ask people when they want to gravitate towards old patterns or old habits or old behaviors, is we'll look at, okay, Is this moving you forward, or is it keeping you stuck? Well, it's keeping me stuck. Okay, and I'm not going to tell them what to do. That's theirs. It's their life, and I'm not going to judge. But I'll say, okay, reflect on that. Notice that. You know, how do you want to respond to that? Well, I don't want to do it. Okay, so what could you do instead, right? And that's where they might visualize the horizon. They might use the ocean breathing. They might use some of the other tools we'll look at today. But it's a great way to start the day. So I'm just going to quickly go through the 5 building blocks of mindful awareness. And really, this just reinforces everything we've already learned. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it's important to just touch on. So we've got our thoughts, right? We have our thoughts that describe our experiences, they express interpretations, they express the meaning and theories, and they can be verbalized internally, or we can express them, you know, to other people and reflect on them. Really, really wonderfully, when we take our thoughts and we take our emotional feelings, that automatically makes it integrative and more likely to create a shift. So when I say to Sue, as I did, what do you notice in your body? That's right hemisphere, right? That's sensory. But as soon as she talks about it and reflects on it, that's left hemisphere. So we're bilaterally stimulating the brain. And anytime we can bilaterally stimulate the brain, or do top down, bottom up, work with the body and the mind, whatever we're doing is going to be that much more effective. So if I teach you one simple technique, it's, you know, whatever you're teaching, try to look at how can I incorporate those 2 pieces, because then it's likely to stick, right, instead of kind of come and go. So we have our cognitions, which are largely shaped based on our experiences, right, and our perceptions. Then we have our emotions, so feelings, tones, moods, and for some people, they don't understand feel. So we can even start with colors, right, or comfortable or uncomfortable. You know, is this okay or not okay? We can really kind of make it concrete. Similar to our thoughts, our emotions also shape our experiences, and past emotions can certainly persuade how we feel in the present moment. And then we have our 5 sense perceptions. So we've talked a lot about our senses, and when we're working with trauma, this is so, so critical. So our sights, our sounds, our smells, our sensations of touch, right? And re-experiencing in the present moment. So what brings most people to me is that they're debilitated by intrusive sight, sound, smell, sensations of touch, right? Much like the gentleman that you were talking about, they can't sleep, they're overwhelmed. When we can't sleep, it impacts our cognitive functions as well, which are already compromised, and it just feels crappy, right? It really just feels crappy. So my goal is to reduce that arousal as quickly as I can. And generally, I'll be quite honest with you, we use a technique, it's an evidence-based trauma processing technique. We do draw a picture you can tell a story about, right? It is not about the product, it is about the process. It is the fastest, most effective, and least intrusive process that I've ever used. So we're not getting in deep, and then I go through, you know, so the veteran that I spoke about earlier, I'm not going to, we did process his war stuff, but that's not the stuff that sticks with me, because that's not the stuff that had the biggest charge for him. You know, the caregiver that tried to make him cry, right, and force him to cry. As I said, you're tracking the affect. When he went to draw a picture of her, he shuddered. When he went to draw a picture of his war stuff, he said, I don't want to traumatize you. And I said, it's not your job to take care of me, right? It's okay, and I'll be okay, right? So he was, you know, concerned about me, but he processed that, and then he realized how helpful it was, and that's when we went to the deeper stuff, right? Because it came up and was taking up space. But all we're doing is looking at what's stuck there. So the example you gave earlier of hearing the thudding, right? That's sensory. The smells, the sensations of touch, the stuff that is trapped there is like this. We're not looking for people to think. We're not looking for them to give a big long story. You want what is right there on surface. And that sensory stuff is the stuff that is stuck and keeping us looping, right? So, you know, tell me a story about what's happening here. Well, my foster mom was really upset that I wouldn't cry, and I remember she backed me into the corner, and she actually stuck feces into my mouth, trying to make me cry, right? What do you remember seeing around you at the time? Ugh, her face, right? Right there. What do you remember hearing around you? So that's all we're doing. If somebody says, I don't know, we go on to the next question. I'm not waiting for them to think, because as soon as they think, they come out of that sensory memory, and oftentimes will go deeper than they need to go. That's not the goal, right? The goal, this process really typically takes, depending on how long it takes for someone to draw, 10 to 15 minutes, right? And I'll tell you, by the next time that I meet with them, there's no charge left to that. It doesn't change what has happened, but it takes away, it depotentiates that memory. Now, what will happen is generally whatever else is holding charge will pop up. It's like our brain says, hey, don't forget about me, I'm here too, right? So the little child that I worked with whose one parent murdered her other parent, we processed the murder. By the time she came back the next week, she wasn't having nightmares about the murder anymore, and Sue's seen the video clips of this, really powerful work. She wasn't having nightmares about that anymore. When you think about it, how are you feeling? Better, worse, the same? Better. She lost both of her parents. One's in jail, one's dead, right? There's going to be grief and loss there forever. But that charge that was debilitating is gone. What are you having nightmares about? Because the way she said it, I could tell she was still having nightmares. And now she said, the nightmares are about mommy and daddy fighting, right? So that becomes our next target. We process that, and that's it. Then we move on to some of the grief work, right? So do you get what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to be, and that's where when I hear those stories of people who are languishing, and I get it, I get people are so afraid to do this work, but they have already lived through this. And I work with a lot of professionals who are taught to start with the least intrusive, or start with like grounding, and they'll do grounding work with people for like a year, right? Or 10 years of therapy. We get to this stuff within the second to third session, right? And people are out of sessions with us usually 10 to 15 sessions max, right? And by the time we get to 10, we're usually spacing it out, so it's bi-weekly or once a month, and it's for maintenance, right? It doesn't have to be long, drawn-out work. But the difference is, if I'm spending a year skills building with you, it's really great. I'm building those skills. I've got the tools. I keep flipping my lid because the pain that is there, the fear that is there, driving the arousal, keeps causing me to flip my lid, and it's going to keep doing that. And that's why we don't start with the least intrusive, because it's not the least intrusive that's making people want to kill themselves, right? It's not the least intrusive that's making them lash out at other people. It's the stuff that's destabilizing them. So I don't know what's taking up space for someone, only they know, right? And that's where I'm saying a lot of times when we work with people, they may come for something else, but when they reflect on what's coming up as most intrusive and taking up space, oftentimes it's them who are bridging that. And the first case I ever did this processing with, I was naive, I was young, and I remember I was new to trauma processing, and I was shocked because she had a horrendous history. Woman in the industry, lots of assault, rape, held at gunpoint, held at knife point, layers and layers and layers of trauma, sexual abuse by brother and father. But what it all traced back to was the childhood stuff. And she said my dad would walk in, I'd walk in the house, and my dad would just start beating me, right? And I never knew why. And then, my mom sometimes would just be at the sink washing dishes while this was happening, and sometimes she'd turn around and join in. And I never knew what I did, right? And I remember thinking, and I didn't voice it thankfully, but at the time I was like, wow, that's what she picked, because I didn't understand how big attachment was. And what I found after decades of doing this work is it pretty much always traces back to attachment. And when it doesn't, because that's not the foundation, it is fast work. It is really, really fast work. So, but our senses and the re-experiencing is important. So when we look at those intrusions coming in and bombarding our senses, if we want to counter that, we need to make it as sensory rich as we possibly can. There's nothing in the brain that is more readily available to us than terror. Okay? That is, first and foremost, the brain's job is to keep the body alive. So if I've experienced terror, that is the most prevalent, readily available thing to me. Excitement, joy, love, beautiful things. They don't keep us alive, apart from the attachment stuff, right? So that will never have the same kind of effect unless we really saturate ourselves in it with all of our senses. So that's where we become really intentional. So when Sue, I know you did that exercise with Toby last night, and I love it. And Sue does work with us, right? She works at our center, so she knows this and does this, but it's hard when we're demoing because we want to be conscious of time. but you know, really settling in, like you could see the affect on your face when you were, you know, petting Toby, and that's beautiful. We call that resourcing. That motion, like you could take the motion of just petting Toby, and I'm picturing my dog right now, and I rub behind his ears, and just this motion, and this motion can become a micro motion that I do right here. My brain knows what it is, and just visualizing that whoosh, can give me that sense of joy or kind of comfort, right? But the richer we make it, as we notice, what does it feel to rub the fur? What does it feel to look into those eyes? What does that smell? The richer we make it, the more it's going to help counter whatever is coming up, right? And I want people to be able to counter what is coming up because, you know, I work a lot with people who come in with very active suicide ideation. And I'll tell you, within 3 to 4 sessions, that has completely shifted. Depression, anxiety, PTSD, the self-harming behaviors, the suicide ideation, the substance use behaviors, all of that drastically reduces. Movement, right? So physical actions, you know, what Lisa's talking about, yoga, body movement, dance, you know, martial arts, physical work, whatever it is. As Sue said in her talk, we are wired to move, right? And we live in a very stagnant society. We sit a lot, we're still a lot, but not still in that way of mindful stillness, still not present, just in that kind of subconscious. So a lot of our responses actually come through movement, facial movements, gestures, and you just through your calm presence, your eye contact, your vocal pitch tone cadence, your the facial tonus, right? You have the ability to regulate somebody just through your movements, right? And we can match where people are, right? Which often will send everybody spinning, or it'll cause like a big release of energy, and then we'll come down. But I love to help people learn how to regulate energy without needing that massive release, right? That it doesn't always have to end in chaos when we have feelings, right? So, you know, this kind of stuff is really important as well. And then our body sensations, so important. What's happening? What's my body telling me? What are those internal sensations? Is there tension? Is there warmth? Is there, you know, expansiveness? Like I love the expansiveness that can happen in our heart when we feel joy and connection. And you better believe that is stuff we want people to be consciously aware of, because they often feel like nobody gets me, and they're isolated and they're alone. And if we can resource and create connection, created, we know it doesn't matter if it's real or created, our brain does not differentiate, but if we can have that connection, or if there's a spiritual connection, beautiful, right? Really, really beautiful. And we can feel in our body, what does it feel like to connect to my dog? What does it feel like when Toby jumps up on me when I'm doing yoga and just wants to like love me, right? And feel it, and it shifts what's happening. So I did prepare for the people that were doing the program, and we can do it if you'd like, but I think I'll give it to you as a take home. Building blocks of a good experience worksheet, and it just kind of walks you through, because again, when people are acutely aware of the pain, they need assistance quite often, and we step into the pain, don't get me wrong. If we just go to feeling better, you're gonna lose people. You've gotta meet them where they are, right? If they're actively wanting to die and you talk to them about wanting to live, you know, well, as a teenager once acutely said me, the first person that I ever did this with, I said, what if we draw a picture about wanting to live? And she was in the hospital, and she said, what part don't you get? I told you I don't fucking want to live. I want to die. Why would I draw a picture of wanting to live? You idiot. She didn't say that, but that basically was the tone. And then I said, okay, let's draw a picture of death, right? What would it like to be dead? We did that first, then we were able to do the life piece, right? We've got to start where people are at. So when we're processing the pain and the trauma, then we can start reflecting on building blocks of a good experience. And we would only use this with somebody if they know that they've had positive experiences, right? There are some people who really have nothing positive in their life. And that veteran, by the way, didn't join the war because he was recruited. He joined because he was death seeking, right? And a lot of people do that. They're like, same as what you described. I'm not actively going to kill myself, but I'd be totally fine if something happened to end my life, right? So that's called death seeking. They do high risk stuff. So I want to take you through 2 guided visualization exercises and 1 little art exercise, and then that will pretty much conclude. I think I've got a couple of slides after that. But I'd like to take you through focusing on sense of sight. This is one of the first skills that we teach people when we're doing training. So very first session, we teach this to people. And again, like I said, we really want to make the activities we use as sensory rich as possible. We get a lot of requests for the scripting for this. It's up on our YouTube video, the whole process. So it's there, and you can write it down, or I can send you the text if you want it. But all I'm going to invite you to do is start by just noticing what you're feeling in your body. So again, no right or wrong, not analyzing, not judging, just noticing. And you can write it down or just notice, whatever you choose. And then I'm going to take you through an experiential exercise. So I'll invite you to close your eyes, adult gaze towards the floor or table, whatever's comfortable, and just imagine that you're someplace relaxing. This can be someplace real, it can be someplace imaginary, it can be someplace you've always wanted to go, or perhaps someplace you've been many times. Just taking in with your senses what you see around you in this relaxation place. Noticing if you could breathe in relaxation, what it would smell like for you. Noticing if you could hear relaxation, what it would sound like for you. Noticing if relaxation had a taste, what it might taste like for you. And noticing if you could reach out and hold relaxation in the palm of your hands, what it would feel like for you. Pausing, taking a deep breath, and drawing your attention back to the room, whenever you're ready. And just noticing again, how did that feel for you? Anyone comfortable sharing? And seeing the lights?
Relaxing.
Relaxing, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I even tasted the salt
Yeah.
in my mouth.
And I don't know how you were feeling before, right? But, you know,
I was feeling a little heavy-ish,
Okay.
from
processing.
Yeah, things
Yeah.
come forward and
Mhm.
you kind of feel that, and just losing my little cap. I went into whoa.
Yeah, but so what happened to that heavy feeling? Is it still there? Is it better, worse, the same?
No, there's a lightness.
Okay.
I feel a lightness around that just by
Beautiful.
feeling that ocean and just being there and tasting it. Yeah, and hearing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And that's all I want you to notice, right? That was seconds, maybe a minute, maybe. And that's all it takes, right? These shifts do not need to be big, long, drawn-out practices. And that's why it also doesn't need to take a year to get somebody to that spot. And the reality is, unless we process what's driving it, the fire as we call it, if we just treat the smoke and we don't treat the fire, we're never going to get to a point where they can use those tools because there's just too much activation, right? So little things like this kind of shift our affective state. So I want to do another experiential. This is, as I said, I brought lots of biofeedback, neurofeedback, different tools with me. And if anybody wants to learn, I'm not going to build it into a presentation because not everybody, and we're conscious of time. But if anyone wants to learn, come to me, right? And I'll show you gladly. I know you've already expressed an
This is
interest.
such a high-tech
And
equipment.
the reason I brought it is because it's expensive, right? And I brought it so that you guys could see what some of this stuff is like and how it works and what it does. Because again, for many people, telling me I can change what's happening in my body is great. Sure I can. But seeing on a screen how my heart rate changes, or seeing, as Sue wants to do pre and post yoga, measuring our blood pressure, that's different. It shows people the capacity that we have to immediately and directly influence what's happening in that physiological landscape, which is pretty cool. And then the neurofeedback is wonderful for retraining the brain, because the brain waves and the brain parts, the regions of the brain, become severely imbalanced, particularly with sexual trauma. That really, really disrupts the limbic system and verbal abuse, right? So those are things that really get very, very deep in the limbic system, which is our emotional regulation. right? So if we can do work to kind of increase the fast wave activity in the frontal lobes, which ties in with higher awareness and self-reflection, and decrease that slow wave activity, and it's games, right? They're not talking about trauma, they're not talking about anything. They're hooking up little sensors to their brain, and they're playing a game. And basically I set a protocol, and when their brain is doing what we've set it to reward, the little scooter will move faster. When the brain starts going into that slow wave activity that we want to, inhibit, then the little scooter slows down. And just like our body learns how to fix itself when it becomes aware of the problem, our brain too has that capacity. It just isn't always aware of where those imbalances are, right? So it's a nice mirroring kind of process, and not at all intrusive.
And that's science.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah, it is science, and it's fascinating, again, to be able to see. So I'm going to take you through a sound experiential. I do have to switch screens for this one. Yeah. So this is Binaural Beats, and Binaural Beats we talked about a little bit yesterday, but I think we were all full and it was the end of the day. But it's a sound layering process. This particular one was designed by a psychologist, I believe, and psychiatrist, and then a whole team of people that get the technology of the sound layering. Sorry, what was it called? Synctuition is what it's called. So SYNC, like sync, and then tuition. You used to have to pay for it, but I think it's free now. So, and I use it, like everything I use at our center, I try out. There are a few things that I keep as something that I use. This is why when I'm flying, I listen to this on repeat because it's set to target theta, so higher order awareness, but it's also set to target delta brainwaves and increase those, which is joy and bliss. And oh my gosh, who doesn't need more joy and bliss in their life? So even if I'm just, a lot of times I sleep on the plane actually, and I find it really helps with jet lag, but even if I'm just doing work, I'll listen to it. And this is the track I listen to actually on repeat. It's called Vacation. And I'm just gonna play it through here. Now this is not the same as listening to it because it's meant to be with headphones because it laterally kind of changes right, left, to again really help integrate that state. I listen to it when I'm trying to go to sleep. For people with insomnia, which I generally don't have, but I haven't slept well the past 2 nights. Generally I don't have, but for people with insomnia, this brings them a lot of relief, right? And people will say it really helps me to sleep. So I'm just gonna invite you to again, notice what's happening in your body right now. I'm gonna play a little clip and then we'll reflect again, okay? She has a little talk, and I'm gonna skip the talk because I usually do. Let's see how quickly it loads up here for me. Sorry, I opened it earlier thinking that it would preload, but I don't think it has. So at the beginning, what she does is she gives a little framing. So whatever it is, if it's a talk on gratitude, or it's a talk on love, or it's a talk on vacation, this one she basically primes you for a vacation. And she says, take a deep breath, you deserve a vacation, and she takes you into this relaxation state, and you even hear a jet taking off. The meditations are 20 minutes, and they're meant to be eyes closed, and all it is a soundscape. So there's no talking, there's some singing, prosodic, like it's just, I find it really, really beautiful. And it does do something different when our eyes are open versus when they're closed. But you do whatever feels good for you. And again, this would usually have the headsets for this. So I'm just waiting for it to stop giving me the wait button. I'm gonna fast forward it a little bit.
I can attest to how awesome it is
Oh,
on
you
headphones.
use it, yeah.
Oh, I did from your last training. Yes, I
Yeah.
it will.
I'm
Yeah.
feeling tonight, I'm going to download this and try this.
Yeah, and well, actually, you can just use our tablet, because it's on the tablet and it's all logged in. So that's why I brought this stuff, so you guys can try it and see what works for you, right? What's helpful for
Great
you.
idea, I think every night we should.
Well, I built in, that was kind of part of the free time, that's why I brought it, so I wanted to show everyone how to use it, so that during free time, it's there, it's out. Don't need an invitation, you don't need anything to log in, just use whatever feels of interest to you.
Deeply
Yeah.
grateful.
No, of course. Okay. Just listen. Oh, it did a little sample, sorry. I don't know why it did a sample. Let's try this again.
Can we plug it into the
think I'd have to unhook my computer to do that.
Oh.
Well, yeah, but we could. But really, what would be the best, if you want to try it, is to put the headphones on. Anne Marie was just saying,
Can I just encourage you? You haven't heard
it's
it
immersive.
until you've heard it on headphones.
This is the music.
The
It's
Sanctuation.
Sanctuation. So
You
it's Binaural
hear
Beats.
those waves, you
It's
hear the
so
wind.
beautiful.
I've never heard anything like it. So even if you
Yeah.
just want to hear it for 30 seconds, sometimes
It's so
you wanna try it.
immersive. Yeah.
You know,
And
maybe-
Are those the Muse headphones? They look
No.
like those, kind of
No.
like, oh.
Yeah, there is a Muse over there.
Oh,
Yes,
that's what
there
I
is a
said.
Muse over there, but this would be the headphones that I gave you for the walk.
Oh,
You would
okay.
just plug them into the tablet, and I've got some
It's
meditations
called
on there,
Sanctuation.
but I've also got Sanctuation on there, and it's all
Mhm.
logged in, and you would just pick the track you want to listen to. So, and you can start it kind of, I said there's like a little intro where she talks about the intention, like maybe it's vacation for relaxation or gratitude. You can listen to it or you can skip it, right? You decide. When I first introduce people to it, I usually keep it short. That's that titration, and then we build to the longer. Nice. Here, let's try this one. Okay, sorry, now the Wi-Fi is
It's okay, we're just
cutting
gonna
out.
have to-
That
we're
means
just gonna
we-
have to listen to it with our
Just
headphones.
exactly. It gave you a little taste. Yeah.
I've got it right here.
Well, and it's there, so I'll just finish up, because I've only, I think, got 2 more slides. But like just noticing, in that little bit that you heard, how did that feel for you? You want more? I want more. I know, me too. So I seriously listen to that on repeat. The only complaint I have about this is that it doesn't have a repeat function. So you'll notice, maybe you've noticed the past couple nights, my screen comes up when I'm trying to go to sleep and I'm not quite there yet, and I start it over again. So I have to actually drag it back to the beginning. I wish it would just loop for me. So any other noticings?
Yeah, you know what, when I played it the first time, it was on my iPad, and I thought, it's interesting. When I put the headphones on, it was
Oh,
all the
it's so
difference, it was night
immersive.
and day. Yeah, it really, because you realize you're listening to it from both sides of your brain, and it felt like you stepped into another space.
Yeah.
And then
And
you're
that's what
in
they
that
are,
space.
soundscapes, right?
Yeah.
So
Like
the
virtual
soundscapes
reality
will
for sound.
change.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That's it.
And a colleague of mine who does a lot of the brain-based research is actually piloting virtual reality right now. I don't know enough about it, but again, they work primarily with complex PTSD. They work a lot with veterans as well, actually. And it's out of Western University Hospital. But they're looking at, how to bring about a sense of awe. And he says, you see these people in these 3D virtual reality scapes, and a massive whale will come by them, and you just see this awe come over their whole body. And I think this is kind of the same thing, only different, because this is our sense of sound, whereas his is more the sight and the sound, and movement, because he says you'll watch people reaching out and like trying to touch the whale or touch whatever it is, and there's just this amazing kind of feeling that goes with it. And again, not something we typically have when our brain is looking for threat, right? So, okay, I've just got 2 more here. So using music to overcome stress, this just looks at a couple of ways that music actually helps us overcome stress. This isn't news, we've known for a long time music's very regulating. My daughter's a very busy travel athlete, and she has a super busy schedule. And when she said to me, I want to do music lessons, and my husband was like, I don't know, she's busy. I said, absolutely you can do music, because it activates every single part of our brain. Listening to music as well. It is so powerful for us. So again, though, what's the music we're listening to? What's the message we're sending ourselves? What are we focusing on? So when we start the day off with music or get the best out of music, this gives us tools, right? So these are tips. Playing an instrument, again, activates every part of our brain. Executive functions as well, so that part of the brain that's impacted by trauma and attachment dysregulation, that impacts our ability to inhibit impulses, control our emotions, start doing something, stop doing something. Music ties in with all of that. If we're in a traffic jam, we can turn on music. For me, it's cathartic. I use music to discharge, so if I'm going home at the end of a hard day, a lot of times that's how I'll help things kind of move through, right? When I was doing my timeline, I had a lot of stuff that happened in the first 19 years of my life. I went through 3 pages and they're full, and I only got to 19. And I know Anne Marie said, well, you gotta feel that. I said, I did feel it. That's why I sat out there. I let the tears fall. I sat there until I felt ready, right? And composed. knows to kind of come back in, and it is big, and I want to do it. It's charged, but this is work for me in my healing. But I noticed when I went back in the room, I started singing, right? And it's really interesting. It's not a song that I even particularly like, and I can't even remember what it was now. But you know, it was just whatever popped up, and it just helped to continue to shift that affect because I was ready to move out of that, right? I felt it, and then I was ready to kind of move forward. So listening to music after a stressful day, again, find what works for you. Same thing as Sue when she talks about the teens. Like I remember when I was a school counselor, I had a teen come into my office and he said, I just want to punch this kid in the face. And I said, okay, you know, tell me about it. And we kind of worked through it. And then at the end of the session when he was leaving, it wasn't a full session, but whatever, he was leaving. And I said, so what are you going to do? And he said, well, I'm going to go listen to music. And I said, well, what kind of music are you going to listen to? You're going to listen to like angry, rage-filled, pump you up and make you want to go punch somebody in the face music? You know, is that what it does for you, or is it cathartic and does it give you release? He said, no, it's cathartic and it gives me release, right? So it's understanding what does it do for us, because if the goal is not to go punch this person, and then I listen to music that actually gets me agitated, well, again, what's more likely to happen? So for him, he said it's cathartic. It was. There was no punching anybody. Actually, he never punched anybody in the time that I knew him, which is great. Dancing to music, right? Playing with others. We have a music therapist. Well, we have a music therapist. Yes,
tonight. I'm telling you.
Well, she saw my post and she said, maybe next year you're going to add music therapy. And the movement, the singing, the synchronicity. You know, even when people don't participate, and Sue knows because she's been a part of, you know, workshops we've done, or client work, even when they don't participate, there's a synchronicity that happens there that regulates our nervous system. And that's why, although there's many different types of yoga out there, that's why I love the Kundalini yoga, because there is chanting, there's movement, there's breath work, and all of that stuff works directly with the vagus nerve, which is our largest sensory nerve in the body, and it is incredibly dysregulated by trauma. So when we can do breath, when we can, you know, splashing cold water on our face stimulates the vagal nerve, humming, breath work, all of that stuff works with the vagal nerve. So very healing.
This is when I get my blood pressure. That's a minute here. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm completely wired from musical side.
Yeah.
It's a mood changer.
And praise, like people think it's our music at church.
This is what I listen to every time in my head.
Yeah.
I play it in my
But
head.
we can do that. Isn't it amazing that we can do that?
Spooling up. I don't know
That's
what happened to
okay.
the Wi-Fi. It just
Well, it's amazing that you have Wi-Fi, I think,
Yes.
really.
What's that?
I
Well,
said I think it's amazing that you have it.
our
Slower.
Wi-Fi ended, the plan ended, so I bought some tokens this morning to get it back up again.
Gotcha.
So it renews tomorrow.
Okay.
Oh, so that's why we don't have it.
Well, we always have it, it just reduces the speed
It
because
is.
it's
That's
using the bonus time.
Right.
Okay.
So, but it should be, it says it's operating,
Yeah.
it says it's operating at full power right now, so it should be.
You might have to sing a song for us, Renee. What is
It's
it?
an instrumental. I can't.
Oh, but it's,
Well,
it's so beautiful.
Oh, there it is.
This is what I listen to in my head.
That's from that TV show.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
What show is that from?
Everybody knows that song.
I know it. And look at your face, right? Feel it. Feel it. Oh my God.
Look at the
Just
joy.
hear it, right?
Look at what it's doing to us.
I know it's from Spring Joy.
It's called
right?
There's a Summer Place by Percy Faith, but I actually visualize myself ice skating.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Yes.
But
Are you
that's
doing
so
pirouettes
beautiful,
yet?
and it does not matter why.
I'm skating backwards.
Yeah.
Look at you see her.
You're just.
Do you skate?
Okay, good. I know the joy on your face is just like.
Yeah, that's the happiest I've seen you since we got here. Look at that.
And seconds. Again, seconds.
Yes.
Right?
I love this.
Yeah.
This is this.
There's an innocence about it. It's just like,
Yes.
Oh, somebody snap a picture of that.
I know.
Oh my gosh, it's
which one is
gorgeous.
that song again?
Gorgeous. Oh.
Is it something about a summer place? she's too busy enjoying
Came
it.
from a summer place. It's an
Okay.
instrumental by
Summer
Percy
place.
Faith.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down too.
Mhm.
Yeah. But see,
Love
just like that,
That's a
right?
secret. There we
And
go.
that's all we need.
Yeah.
So you can use that in times that you need some uplifting, right? Some comfort. Same with
That's
the
great,
relaxation place, visualization, right? The thing that I love about these things is just like you said, you can play it in your mind. Nobody even knows you're doing it. You can call up that relaxation place. Nobody knows you're doing it. I can say, visualize your relaxation place right now. And take it in with your senses, and you can do it with your eyes wide open. It's free, it's portable, it's always with you, right? And our imagination is phenomenal, right? So often with clients, I'll have them draw out their relaxation place, and that just again kind of deepens it. There are coloring materials on the table. If you choose to do that, go for it. Humming, right? Or humming on the exhale, or even one of the styles of yoga that I do, she always has a sigh out. She'll go sigh it out, and let me tell you, when you actually, right? Just try that. Sigh it out. Breath
Side
in.
out yourself.
Right? Or whatever, but it's just again taking that tension and releasing it. Seconds, right? Toning, tone the tone of that emotion. We'll hum, we'll sing, vowel chanting, I often introduce people to. Because when we've got constriction and immobilization, and again with sexual abuse, we often have that. You know, they felt like they couldn't move, they couldn't, I was restricted. So a lot of times that immobilization comes to voice as well. And people will feel like they can't breathe, they'll feel like they can't speak. So I'll start, again, we titrate. I'm not going to start with using your voice because they feel like they can't. But I'll start with, I wonder if we can just, start to send the breath to the back of your throat. And if they can do that, I might say, I wonder if you can just try to move your neck side to side, right? One guy, when I was processing with him, and again, this was actually, he was a veteran, but not for very long because he had so much of his own trauma that really interfered. But, when he was processing kind of restriction around an assault that happened, he actually, his hand went up to his throat and he didn't even realize he had done it, right? And I said, what's happening with your hand right now? Because he was even kind of gripping a little bit. And he was like, I had no idea I was doing that, right? And it was, he's right-handed and it was the left hand because the person who had pinned him up and assaulted him was left-handed. And, just even being able to move him through that, I said, I wonder if we can kind of take that hand down, right? Notice where you are. And he's like, I feel like I can't move. And I said, okay, that's all right, notice that. But can you move, right? Let's see if you can even just move your neck from side to side. And he was like, and he took the breath himself as soon as he moved, right? And then it was, okay, if there's a tone that goes with that, if you could tone the tone of that release, what would it be? And that's where I often will use the vowel chanting because people, it's hard for them to find a tone. Once they get used to it, they know. But I might say, try A. So all we would do is breathe in, breathe out, A, right? And just notice how that feels. And if that doesn't shift it, and I usually try a couple of times, then we'll try another vowel. It's just a vowel. It's not religious or spiritual, it's just a vowel. And all it is the vibrations. And that's why I love the Kundalini because it's moving through, but it's giving voice to people who often have had no voice, right, and constriction. And experimenting with our vocal sounds and noticing, does that stimulate, right, when I make this tone? So for some people, E will be discharging, for some it will be invigorating, for some they won't like it at all. And that's why we try it, right? It's just about trying, noticing, reflecting, and then maybe incorporating if it's a tool, right? But then there are other sounds that may be grounding for us, right? Or there may be breath work that we do that helps to stimulate when we feel shut down or sleepy. Or last night, Lisa had us breathing in and out through our left nostril, which is good for grounding. So bilaterally, when we switch, it's actually, again, integrative and great for increasing focus, I believe. Calming.
Because the right side's more stimulating, more, if you need more
Right, so if we're
vitality.
doing both,
Exactly.
it's, yeah. So that was really cool because none of us could sleep last night. So it's little things like that so we can help people move through those states. So there is a take-home activity, and what I can do is, even just email this to each of you for your self-reflection, or there's 2 copies printed. And just, I gave some activities to practice exploring the environment around you with your senses. There's no right or wrong, right? And it just is little things, but noticing what shifts things for you. And that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you very
welcome.
much.
Thank you.
That's
Did you
oh,
find
I
my
do have a
question?
question. Yeah, where did you get that?